Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I thought I would discuss kind of the downsides of living in Japan. For those of you who are new here, my name's Catherine. I'm from New Zealand and I recently got back from my working holiday. So I spent about 1 year living and working in different places around Japan. Yeah, obviously this video is largely based on my personal experience, and yeah, my disclaimer would be that obviously the purpose of this video isn't to like discourage people from moving there, because I really enjoyed my time in Japan. But I think being a tourist is different to living in a country, and nowhere is perfect. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of consider some of these things before you move there. So yeah, number one is definitely the low salary. So if you're coming from like New Zealand or Australia or even I think UK, like North America, generally salaries in Japan are going to be a lot lower. And I mean like less than half of probably what you're used to. And so yeah, it can be really tough to take a pay cut, like and yeah, obviously the low salary means that you're not going to be making a lot, you're probably not going to be saving much money. Yeah, a lot of people I knew in Japan were like, barely getting by. They were just like broke all the time, which was not really fun. Number two is work-life balance. So I think people know this, but yeah, in Japan, like generally if you're working in an office, you're working very long hours, like it's very much part of the culture, it's expected. And yeah, so even if you do overtime, most like often you don't get paid. And yeah, people are just very stressed, like even especially in big cities on the trains, like you see people, they're always tired, always sleeping. I remember I'd be out in like, in Osaka when I lived there, I would be on trains at like 8 or 9 p.m. and people are just like, salarymen in their suits, like just getting home basically from the office, I think. So yeah, definitely not ideal. And I knew this going in. So yeah, I will say that my experience was a bit different because I worked casual jobs, so I didn't really have like a 9 to 5, and I'm very glad that I didn't really seek that, because I kind of knew going in like the work-life balance just wasn't it for me. So yeah, if you're planning to go there and work, I guess more like a career orientated role, just know that you're probably going to be working very long hours for not very much pay. Next point is dietary requirements. So this is a big one for me because I'm vegan, if you guys didn't already know. And yeah, basically Japan is not very friendly towards vegetarians, vegans, anyone with dietary requirements basically. Especially in traditional restaurants. I mean, obviously in big cities there are more vegan friendly places. Obviously, you can find vegetarian restaurants and things like that. But generally, like Japanese people, like it's very uncommon. Like I don't think I met any Japanese people that were like fully vegetarian. Sometimes people would tell me they don't eat meat, but like it's very common that they put bonito or like fish or extract in their like soup, in their stock, and even in a lot of food, like we'll have milk or like milk powder or some derivative of milk or egg, or yeah, it's very hard to find fully vegan things. And also obviously the language is different, so when you go shopping, like it's really annoying because you have to translate basically every single product that you're buying, and after a while you just kind of get sick of it. And also fruit and vegetables are very expensive in Japan, especially fruit, like even more than in New Zealand, which is saying a lot because New Zealand is already expensive as it is. So yeah, luckily for me, I worked in a restaurant for like the first few months in Japan, so I got a lot of free food, and free fruit especially, which was really good. But I remember when I had to go shopping by myself, like I think the only thing that I could afford was like bananas and maybe like some frozen fruit occasionally. But yeah, other than that, like fruit is very expensive and vegetables generally are pretty expensive too. So yeah, it's not very good for vegans or vegetarians. And like if you're even like gluten free, I mean, I don't know if I think it would probably be easier if you're gluten free, but yeah, definitely if you're going out to eat or something, like don't expect there to be vegan or vegetarian options like by default. So yeah, I think if you do have dietary requirements, definitely consider that, and yeah, do some research beforehand, I guess. And you probably have to get good at cooking, because otherwise, yeah, there's not going to be a lot to eat. Another point on food is that, like, don't get me wrong, like Japanese food is great, but I think after a while it gets very limited, especially if you're coming from somewhere that's pretty diverse in terms of food options. Like in Japan, the especially in small towns, you're probably going to have like maybe an Indian or like Nepalese restaurant and an Italian restaurant, and that's like all you have in terms of foreign food, because yeah, they're just not very it's not a very diverse country, right? So that means that you're not going to have a lot of food options. And if you want like, you know, Western food, let's say, it's going to be very expensive and probably not as good. And yeah, one thing obviously, like, I talked to a lot of people in Japan, like foreigners, and one thing I think we all agreed on was like bread is not the same in Japan, and we all kind of miss that. Yeah, I would say that like whilst Japanese food is obviously great and amazing, you're probably gonna miss food from your home country. Another point is that everything is smaller in Japan. You'll notice this like pretty much instantly. I'm not a super tall person, but even for me, I found that a lot of things were even small. So if you're like 6 foot, then I can imagine, yeah, you might struggle in Japan. Everything is gonna be small. Like, you're probably gonna be hitting your head on like door frames because yeah, everything is tiny, and you might not find like, you know, sizes when you go shopping. Clothes probably won't fit, even shoes and stuff like that. So if you are, let's say, I don't know, a bigger person, maybe consider this before you come, and yeah, like have, you know, enough clothes or shoes or whatever. Like, just know that you might not find your size. Another point is that Japan is still quite a traditional country in many senses, and obviously the culture is, you know, very strong. Like I said, there's not a lot of immigration, there's not a lot of diversity culturally. One big aspect is like how many rules there are and how everything is very organized, and this definitely like leads to positive things. Like, everything in Japan works pretty well, but I find that people are not super flexible, and usually like things have to be done in a certain way. And I don't know, I'm the type of person that I kind of like to go with the flow, whereas in Japan I feel like it's not as common. Like, generally there's one way of doing things and everybody kind of follows this, and yeah, people are very obedient, I guess. They don't really question rules or like the way things are done. It's just kind of how it is. I think people are also very concerned about their appearance. Like, people are very concerned about dressing in a certain way, and like you know, makeup. Like, girls spend a lot of time on their makeup, hair, like fashion and clothes and whatever. Like, obviously this depends on where you are in Japan, but I feel like in the big cities definitely people are very concerned about their appearance. And this might be a good thing. Obviously, if you're into fashion, it's cool and it's fun, but I'm a pretty chill person. Like, I don't really care, you know, about what people wear or like what they look like, really. So I think this can be hard if you're not used to it. And yeah, additionally on that point, Japan is not very friendly towards like tattoos, piercings, if you have even dyed hair. I've heard guys that like told me they were told to, you know, cut their hair or like shave their beard because it wasn't like professional looking. So yeah, that's something to consider as well if you're looking to work, I guess, in a more professional role. Even things like English teaching, I don't think you would be allowed to have like, you know, tattoos or visible tattoos or piercings or anything like that. I feel like you don't really have as much freedom to express yourself in like an office, you know, professional setting. The next point is the language. So obviously the main language in Japan is Japanese, but one thing that kind of shocked me was how little English people speak, even in the big cities. Like, I remember being in Tokyo, and you know, central Tokyo, where like there's so many tourists, right? And people still didn't really want to speak English, or they really struggled to speak English. So it's really hard to communicate if you don't know Japanese. I'm someone that's pretty good with languages, but I felt like Japanese was pretty difficult, and it's still, yeah, definitely one of the hardest languages to learn, especially for English speakers. So that can be quite hard, just, you know, communication, especially if you're going somewhere maybe rural, and yeah, there's probably going to be not a lot of people that speak English, so it's going to be hard to communicate, and you might feel like you can't fully express yourself and, you know, say what you want to say, or, you know, even like your opinions. With that being said, obviously moving to Japan is a good opportunity to learn and practice your Japanese. So if that's something that you are looking for, then definitely it could be a good option. If you're going like somewhere in the countryside, most people probably won't speak much English, so it'd be a good opportunity for you to practice your Japanese language skills. The next con, I would say, is like the weather and then general like natural disasters that happen. So earthquakes are super common in Japan. I think I experienced one earthquake that I felt like a decent shake, but luckily obviously I wasn't hurt. And yeah, obviously it's something that happens all across Japan. They get earthquakes, they can get tsunamis as well, so just keep that in mind. Another thing is the rain. So I didn't realize this, but Japan is actually like kind of like a tropical country, especially the south, like obviously Okinawa. But even other parts of Japan get a lot of rain, especially during summer. The summer can be very wet and also very hot as well, especially in the big cities. Luckily, I spent the summer in Nagano, which is like more of the countryside and the mountains, so it wasn't that hot. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to be in like Tokyo during summer in 40-degree heat. Like that does not sound fun to me. So yeah, just be aware that the summers can be very hot and there could also be a lot of rain as well. Another thing I didn't like about Japan was how much plastic there was. Like I felt like everything, literally everything in the supermarket was covered in plastic. So many things are single individual items. So for example, you would see like one banana or one apple like wrapped in plastic, which to me just feels very unnecessary. But yeah, everything in Japan is covered in plastic. Everything you buy, like makeup, I don't know, everything is just, it's packaged very well, I will give them that. But I just feel like sometimes it's not necessary. And yeah, I don't know where it's all going, to be honest. I feel like it's kind of hard to avoid. And this is not just Japan. I think generally a lot of countries in like Asia do this. Maybe it's for like hygiene reasons, but yeah, it's kind of annoying to see how everything is kind of covered in plastic. Now the negative point is obviously the cultural shock. I guess this is common sense, but if you're coming from, you know, a Western country and you're not used to the Japanese culture, even other countries in Asia, like I'm Chinese, I talk to people from China, and we both agreed that like there's a very big difference between Japan and, you know, China and Korea. So you can imagine from like Europe or, you know, Australia or America, like the difference is even bigger. Basically, people in Japan are super nice and super respectful, but it's almost over the top in a way where they're almost like not very honest, because I'm a super direct and open person. So I personally would rather have someone be honest and, you know, if there's a problem, like tell me and then we can like resolve it. But in Japan, I feel like people, they kind of beat around the bush. Like they will never say directly to your face, you know, if they don't like you, if there's something wrong, they will basically just make hints at it. So yeah, I don't really like this personally. I find that people in Japan, they're generally not very direct, and this kind of is a negative for me. Lastly, a couple points. Cultural ignorance. So basically, what I mean by this is, since Japan is not a very diverse country, I felt like people are kind of living in a little bubble. Like Japan is, I think because it's such a nice place, like it's very comfortable to live in and people are just very happy being there. Generally, even though like I mentioned, salaries are not very high, things are pretty cheap. So generally people, you know, they have nice things, they have a good quality of life, they're not really thinking about leaving and going to other places, although this is changing, I think, with the younger generation. But yeah, people don't really know a lot about other cultures. Like I remember talking to my friends or my colleagues in Japan, like Japanese colleagues, and I would be like, oh yeah, they'd ask me what I eat. I was like, oh yeah, I like, I don't know, hummus, for example. And they're like, what's that? I've never heard of it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that they don't know about, which growing up, I feel like in Auckland, it's pretty diverse. You know, we learn about other cultures. But there, like a lot of people are just in their own little bubble and they don't really know about other countries. And I think obviously this is a negative because people are not as open-minded. They only really have one way of seeing things. If they see a foreigner or if somebody does something in a different way, it's just very strange to them. I think if you want to kind of fit into Japanese culture, you really have to like assimilate completely. Otherwise, you know, you're just going to be seen as very strange or weird. Finally, onto that point is I feel like Japan as a society is not super open to immigration. Whilst the number of foreigners is definitely growing, a lot of people enjoy life there. I feel like, for me, I feel like as a foreigner, especially if you don't look Japanese, you will never really be Japanese and you're always going to be treated like a foreigner. Yeah, I think that's something that I didn't really quite like, and one of the reasons why it'd be hard for me to live there long term, because I really value diversity and, you know, a society that's very open-minded and accepting, and I don't feel like Japan is quite there yet. So yeah, that is it for this video, and I feel like I have been quite negative, but overall I still did enjoy my time in Japan, and I think it is a great country, but obviously nowhere is perfect, and I think it's important to consider the downsides as well. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you've made it this far, I'll see you guys in my next video. Ciao!